Hi there. Every Sunday, a group of autistic people get together and drop in. It's an informal group, but some of the things that people say deserve a bigger audience. So they give us permission for us to put them in an edited reel, and that's what we're here for. Today's edited reel of the conversations that we have about our own autism. Cheers, enjoy. Hello there. This is the 444 drop-in for Autistic Radio. A group of people getting together, putting their voices down. In this recording, not everybody will be recorded. People make their choices. So if there's a little bit of a disjointed piece here and there, you'll understand.
Yeah, good afternoon all. I'm reclining in the easy chair.
We've all got to be comfortable, haven't we?
You can hear the air around you. I was away last weekend, and I think one of the things I found out was when I was sitting here on Friday night before I left the house and very stressed. I think there's two stress issues in this, probably both to deal with autism. One is the stress of doing something a bit different, but the other is the stress of not doing what I would normally do in my routine.
I get that. So it's double-edged, isn't it?
Now, when I went to leave, I went round the house probably half a dozen times, checking all the windows were shut and all that. And it took me 3 attempts to get to the bus stop because I turned around twice to come back to check the door was locked. But it all went well in the end.
That's good to hear, GR, that it did go well in the end. I can relate to what you're saying about double checking and double checking. I've just been through a period where I've had to travel by train because somebody wrote my car off in an accident, and on a Sunday they kept changing all of the trains so they were cancelled, and I was continuously double checking and making sure that I'd got onto the right place and got onto the right place. And I think that was exaggerated for me as an autistic person in comparison to a regular folk. So yeah, double checking your windows makes sense.
Yeah, it was quite tough because bus to town, coach to Heathrow, and then an overnight coach to Glasgow. So it was 13 hours to get there and 13 hours home. But the overnight was horrendous. I couldn't sleep because the person sat next to me had their elbow in my ribs and one of their feet under the footwell where I was. And there was snoring, people shouting into phones. Someone had a bird song or something on their phone, which you'd think would be quite relaxing. But when it's on a loop for 6 hours, it's not so good.
Wow. That's my idea of hell.
Yeah, it was the No Men's third ever gig in 23 years and their first gig in 6. And I've been flag waving and championing them for over 10 years now. So it was something I had to do. And I was made very welcome there. I was in the venue early. I was sat with the band while everyone was setting up. And yeah, I mean, they played for 30 minutes, but it was all worthwhile. They were very nice to me, very kind people.
Yeah, I once did a cross Europe trip years and years ago when the Czech Republic became, it's Chechnya, isn't it now? But it was the Czech Republic back then. And I did a probably 3-day coach trip there, going through every major city to pick people up. And the back seat was full of people who had decided to bring a massive ghetto blaster with them and sing, dance and be drunk most of the way. So when I arrived, I just wanted to go home.
Yeah, I went to Prague 30 years ago now when the Stones played there, and it was, I think, 22 hours each way.
You guys those are marathon trips. What we've ended up doing is, even though it's just getting from the south of England up to Scotland, splitting the journey in Birmingham and actually having an overnight because just doing it all in one just felt too much. And that's nowhere near the kind of hours that you're talking.
When I got to Glasgow, the hotel was supposed to be check-in at 3 and you had to pay £15 if you wanted to check in at 12. But I booked to check in at 12. This is at 8 o'clock in the morning. And they didn't charge me, so that was good. And then I just did my usual thing. I just went down to that's another thing, that I look at a map and then I've looked at it once. And so I knew how to get from the coach station to the hotel to the venue. And then my usual stop, which was HMV. I went to the Glasgow Art Gallery, and there was around the corner from that was a police box, so I had to get a photograph of that. There was a Piper busking, which I didn't take a photograph of. And then it was FOP Records, and I went to Subway. I usually go to the chip shop on Saturday lunchtime, but a sausage and chips in Hythe money is £4.75, and in Glasgow money it's £10.95. So I went to Subway instead.
I have to admit, when I did my journey, I was an awful lot younger, so I don't think I can take it on now. The worst part about it is the person I was travelling with said they had this great knowledge of the country, and then after we'd had a trip right across Europe from London, we went to Holland, I think we went to Belgium, we were stopping off to pick up people, and we finally got there, and I got off the bus and I said, "Do you know where we're going? Do you know where we're staying?" And he says, "I don't know the place and I haven't booked anything." Yeah, that was probably a bit of a cautionary tale about travelling, really. And if you don't have it, you're all your ducks in a row. I ended up having to do the whole thing myself. On the first night, I slept for what I would say was about 16 hours, literally, because we were so tired from the bus journey.
I've been home a week and I'm struggling to get my sleep patterns back to where they were, but I thought it would be like that. Sometimes it's not bad, but I'm waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and then laying there for a couple of hours before I doze off again.
My sleep is awful, so I can feel for you. I always get up. This morning I was actually up before 6, and in the front room sitting with the cat, really. And I just have to get on with things because there's lots of things to do for the cat in the morning. But I've got into this routine now where I'll go to bed about 11, and then I have to have headphones to quiet my brain to get me to sleep. But I'm rarely up after 6.
The thing about being in a strange bed as well, which trying to get comfortable in a different bed. And if you're like, I was only there for one night, but yeah, I struggled with that. When I used to go away years ago, the first night I would never sleep. And I'd only be away for a couple of nights anyway. But yeah, in my advanced years, I wouldn't fancy trying too much now.
Yeah, my husband has trouble sleeping when he's abroad or if we go anywhere. Throughout our Vegas trip, which was quite short, it was only 5 days, but he could not adjust to the bed. He could not adjust to the room. He was really uncomfortable with it. Now, we don't really do trips like that now, but I think I love a Premier Inn. I really do, because I like their beds.
Yeah, I've got like a hole in the middle of the mattress on my bed. I really need to think about getting another mattress, but I'm not sure on the money. So I'll probably just try flipping it over for a while.
I got one of those mattress top, like the memory foam type ones, but I found that's made my bed a lot more comfortable because I haven't really been able to change it for a while either. So I've got myself something it's actually like a down thing, and you just lay it hooks onto the bed and it makes it slightly softer on the top.
Yeah, I think I'll have to check one of those out.
Yeah, it does make a lot of difference because I've had the same mattress for ages, and getting rid of mattresses and affording mattresses and getting whole new beds. I'm just making this one last. I like this bed. I'm just making it last as long as possible. So if this goes, I'll get a memory foam thing or something. So I just keep putting something on top of the mattress. You can't feel the springs.
Yeah, beds ain't cheap, are they?
By the way, I've seen The Last Resident Alien and I know what happens.
So what did I miss last week? Because I did try and use the Wi-Fi on the coach at about 5:45, but it said it was a public connection and not secure, and it wouldn't let me connect. So I had to pass.
I think the discussions are so ephemeral that remembering what we were speaking about last week is a bit beyond me.
Even if I could have connected, I would only have been able to chip in on text, because there's no way that God knows what the sound would have been like on a National Express coach barrowing down from Birmingham to town.
I think Jules did some live broadcasts back in January from transport.
Yeah, a night bus from Bengaluru to Mumbai. I don't remember it being particularly successful. I think we cut everything out that came from my microphone. I saw that, Robbie, you were at a music jam last week. You can hear, Lucy, that I've avoided getting any spoilers on Resident Alien because it's going to be quite a while before I throw my dollars or pounds out to pay for a streaming service that it's on.
I'm recalling that last week's conversation involved Michael and Teresa, and we were discussing Canada to a certain extent. And I think so. Yeah, there was a lot of voices last week.
Yeah, that's always something to get used to, isn't it? A different shape to the conversation. I'm wondering whether we feel that we managed to stay the right balance there for what feels familiar and what's new and interesting.
It's autistic people chatting, but it's not necessarily chatting about autism most of the time. Well, I was going to bring something up this week, wasn't I? I don't usually pay much attention to the news, but I was just noticing the Angela Rayner thing this week. And somebody brought up the issue of when you try and look after the future of your disabled child. But anyway, to continue, it made me think about people who've maybe ended up on their own from a situation of being in a family situation, and the preparations have thrown them into a bit of chaos. As much as it was a political story about a certain character in the government, it raised the issue of, like, how do you look after the future of your disabled child regarding, say, property and care and maintenance?
There's a real difficulty here. As somebody says in the text, that Angela Rayner had a trust set up to control the ownership of a property that would keep a disabled person in some level of independence. But then trusts have to have trustees. And if the people who set up the trusts are no longer around, the trustees control everything. So you are actually handing over the control of an autistic person or disabled person's life to other people, and it's really down to them. People like ourselves that speak and are able to deal with society to some degree, it's really quite important for us to have at least some kind of control over what happens. So maybe we can prepare ourselves with information and try to do what best we can to control the situation without leaving it all in the hands of somebody else.
I still live as if I'm only getting about maybe 60 or 70 quid a week. Not deliberately. I think it's just habit. It's ingrained into me from a time when, in the 80s, when it was just like surviving on the bare minimum and learning how to make, do and mend and stuff like that. And it's kind of a lifestyle I grew to love, even though it was hard. There's nothing romantic about it. And so when there is money around, it's not threatening, but it becomes a bit uneasy. What's this for? What do I do with this? And having things organised, it's kind of like a balancing act, I find. It's just, because the number one thing is just to be yourself and what you want to be, and not let the money dictate those decisions. But having people around you trust who can help with that is always good. We used to go out late at night on the evenings before buckets were lifted when the refuse people came round and look for electrical stuff and useful items. I remember the night we found a pulley, like for hanging clothes that you used to hang up in the ceiling of your kitchen, and dragging that home one night trying to like avoid main roads and being seen by the police. But it was a life, and the kind of life now where you have home comforts and everything's kind of like taken care of and looked after. You can see the waste in it. The fact that you won't switch that light off, although I still do, but you will let things run that normally you would never have let run because of the expense of it. You just couldn't afford to let that happen, or you would have run out of power. So again, it's nothing romantic about that life, but it forces you into doing other things. But it's no fun when you get older, really.
This is quite strange for me because, yes, I have walked around the market picking up the half an onion and cut the mould out of things and made meals out of that. Not a lot. I've done it, though. And I've also done what you described there, looking for things and making use of them, Raymond. I still do. I still look in skips, even though none of these things are necessary. And I can't throw away things. I have to use the absolute last bit of everything. I open up the toothpaste tube with a pair of scissors, and I only put a pea size on the toothbrush, unlike Prince Charles, who apparently has a man who puts a whole inch of toothpaste on a thing. So it sticks with you, all these things, but to some extent I don't think it's a bad thing. I think maybe they're skills we're going to need again, and we should stick to feeling proud of ourselves for doing these things rather than feeling bad for what led us there in the first place.
Yeah, it makes me think about unpredictability, which one reads is not something that autistic people are fond of. They like predictability, but I don't buy into that. I think there's something about being able to thrive on marginal experience. So when you're almost forced out of yourself and out of your domestic arrangements to make things happen, serendipity creeps in, the random, the unpredictable, which can change your life one way or another. That doesn't often happen when you're stuck at home with your subscription TV service and whatever home comforts you've habituated yourself to.
I don't buy into the autistic people require predictability trope either, Raymond. So many of the autistic people I know are willing to work a different way out and do things differently to how normal society works. It feels to me as though it's actually the other way round, that autistic people are much more likely to embrace something new and be open to new ideas. And I think the prejudice that is attached to autistic people, that we are described as people who require predictability, it's damaging. It puts us down, and it misses the point of what might be making life difficult for an autistic person, particularly people who are less outspoken than we are, people who have more difficulty in communicating, maybe younger people, for instance, that this idea that they can't deal with change and they need predictability, I don't think it is that. It's not the change, it's appropriateness, I believe.
Yeah, that's like when people tell you what to do, is when you lose this control of knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think what they do is they interpret our need to be part of the decision making, to know what's happening next, to know what is planned, as a need for us to always do the same thing, and that's too easy. It's too easy for them. It's another othering of us.
I think it's a very old and important thing, being able to exist in society when you're not quite 100% invested in that society. It's reminiscent of what I was mentioning earlier about the 80s with Lucy, this make do and mend thing that came in the 80s with long-term unemployment. That wasn't the first time people had experienced that. The war, other things, the depression, various times in your life you can be confronted with a society that's quite unhelpful and unsupportive, and you really have to find a way through it, which is often, difficult because you've been conditioned to depend on that very society to support you. That's true, Robbie.
Somebody said at some point during this conversation that our conversations are eclectic and they're not about autism, or not solely about autism. But look where we are now. We're describing our experience through an autistic lens and investigating it. It always somehow leads to something about our natures, usually in the second half of the programme.
And it does often end up being a positive thing, in a positive light, that autism. What is negative and what is often the subject of conversation is the repercussions of that autism not being communicated with or given space to be. And so that's the mental health aspect, the stress, the factors that bring one to the agencies in order to gain a diagnosis. But at core, there is this autistic being, I think, which is largely a positive thing.
I agree with that, and I would frame it to say that what they're trying to deal with is the results of being autistic in the society. They're trying to deal with the symptoms. And when they then describe us, they see us as symptoms. Whereas actually being autistic is a very lovely way of being as a human being, a very valid version of humans. And most autistic people, because there's such a high percentage of autistic people by comparison to the numbers that have ever been admitted, are doing quite well in their own spheres, in their own niches, when they find their own groups. That puts them in power, doesn't it? That means that they have what they want, which is status and control.
And they control the dialogue and the conversation.
Well, it's 5:44 now, so our drop-in hour is finished, and thank you to all the people who have texted, and also to the people who have put their voices to this, that are going to allow us to put some of those words out into the podcast. If you join us here at the 444, your voice isn't recorded, your text isn't recorded, but the people here have given permission so that it's an example for others. See you again, always reliably, Sunday, 4:44 p.m. Cheers, guys.